And I went out there
And
and
it
just
was
sat
sleeting.
so I could give
Yeah.
Alwyn a hard
Oh,
time.
God, here we go.
And then he said, get
So-
over here.
I was prepared to walk
never
out
know,
and
Rod, yeah.
gingerly walk and to go to the truck.
No.
No, it
Oh,
wasn't
you
like
did
at all.
Oh, it
pretty well.
wasn't?
No.
Concrete, and well, our steps are wooden, so we're always like if it's,
Well, my driveway.
Going well.
but our, yeah, ours was
We need to find a family though.
weird.
No.
Each year we
I had a
Because
lot
we're
of
so
ice all
much
over
higher
the truck.
elevation.
sponsor and buy gifts for family. Just don't have one this year.
One
We're
block,
out looking.
one block.
So if you know of anybody,
Yeah, it was super. And Tony warned me because he knows how ungraceful I am.
Yeah. Where's Russ?
He's ill.
Oh,
He's a bad cold.
Darcy. Just checking.
Sorry, I'm trying to
Yeah.
skim through this before we talk about it.
Is this the new?
Maybe that's where she got his start.
I haven't seen this.
That's it, for the record. I can make it, probably.
oh, so the chief couldn't make it, so he sends the sheriff?
No, the sheriff's here for the update. The chief actually, I think, had to go back out on a call because he was out on road here. That was up against.
So Matthew's back in tonight?
Nephew, you're the sergeant at arms tonight.
Oh, Pat's
He's still
here?
here.
He's just late.
He was thinking we might have to go back out on that call.
He was hoping he might
He
have
was
to go.
probably I'll just come and have the dinner and then go back.
He stayed here tonight?
No.
You find anything, you go for the bones and find it.
Oh, I hope this isn't very long.
When you're ready.
Okay, hope they'll get connected here pretty soon.
Unless it's participation.
Because most of this stuff was,
It's very routine.
I hope like February, they start getting real long.
thanks.
Stinker.
I'll make sure to
Yeah.
public comment.
Yeah.
You people.
I'm gonna blame it all on you.
Let's try to pull up the agenda here. Okay.
All right. Roll call, council, please.
Tanner Elliott,
Present?
Linda Miller,
Here?
Tim McLaughlin,
I'm present.
Darcy Moncurtis,
Present.
Russ Brown, absent, Mayor Lawrence.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda, and we have one addition, sections A, B, and C for an executive session. Can I have a motion to amend the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second. All right, been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that's approved. Next item is presentation proclamations, Maritize update. Who is doing that? Oh, there he is. Come on forward. How are you? Just for the record, state your name and address, please.
Jeff Thompson, Maritize West, 100 Tightland Road, in Dallas, Oregon.
Can you put it a little closer? Make sure everybody can hear you.
Okay, how's that?
Fine. All right. Give us an update.
Okay, well, we're still here.
Good.
Now, before I get started, I want to thank for the opportunity to come down and address council and such. When I'm invited down, I asked, well, what do you really want to hear? And they said, well, just tell us about the plant and what you've been doing. So I'm going to start with a little bit of the history. The plant was originally located in Wyeth back in 1915. As the railroad progressed down the gorge, they moved it to the Dalles roughly in the 1922-24 timeframe. So we've been here just short of 100 years. Had various operators over the years. Some of them originally was the Oregon Steamship and Navigation Company, Union Pacific Railroad, J.H. Baxter, Kerr McGee Chemical Corporation, up till 2005, and then at that point in time, the plant was really scheduled to be closed, and then a group of investors stepped in and we were able to purchase assets and keep the facility open. Currently, we employ 51 people, had a historical high of 60. Our wages range from $17.52 an hour to $24.44 an hour, 7 salary positions. Annual payroll, which is dollars in people's pocket going out to the community, is $2.2 million. Our payroll for all HR services, taxes, benefits, and such runs about $3.2 million a year. We produce cross ties, switch ties, and bridge timbers for the railroad industry. Roughly between 800,000 and 1 million ties a year. 75% of those ties are Douglas fir, which are harvested indigenously here in Oregon and Washington. The other 25% some oak that's imported from the Midwest. Some railroad facts. Annually, the industry uses about between 12 and 15 million ties a year just in track maintenance, and no one's really building any new lines anymore. That boils down to about approximately 4,000 ties per mile of track, and the typical lifespan of a tie is 30 to 40 years. So that's enough of the history. When the company was founded, our business philosophy was going to be safety first. We've been a participant in the Oregon Voluntary Protection Program, or more commonly called OSHA STAR, which is geared for worker safety and protection. Out of all the industrial sites in the state, there's only about 20 of us that have met that or been bestowed that honor by Oregon OSHA. Part of that, we do industrial hygiene testing, chemical exposure, wood and noise, silica dust for all our employees. That's annually. Our test results have always been well below the OSHA worker standards. Our second business point is protecting the environment. We've updated all our primary and secondary containment to try to mitigate any foreseen catastrophe. And then third option is product quality. We don't have a great selection of customers, so we have to keep them happy. So the big issue I think everybody was addressing is the air issues over the past few years. We do have a valid air contaminant discharge permit issued by DEQ. We've never been in violation of our permit in the 25 plus years that I've been managing and working with the DEQ. DEQ has inspected the Ameritized facility numerous times over the years and never found any compliance issues. In the past, since 2015, we've had 6 formal inspections and several informal DEQ visits. Needless to say, we have a very good working relationship with the Department of Environmental Quality. Both the DEQ and the Oregon Health Authority, with assistance from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Health Services, has conducted monitoring programs and have determined that our operations do not present either a long-term nor short-term health effects to the community. Now, that being said, we don't take that laying down. We have things we are doing and have done. In the past, we've participated with community members and the DEQ to study odor issues through community surveys and trying to correlate that to plant production times in our scheduling. We've enclosed all of our process vessels and storage vessels so that any air emissions coming out of that is captured and goes through a scrubber system before being released. We have elected to voluntarily voluntarily enter into a mutual agreement order with the state in early 2015 and 16. Part of that process, it's basically, we agreed to do this as a legal document that the state can monitor us and keep us in check and give the community assurances that we're doing what we say we're supposed to be doing. We submitted an action plan to DEQ, and it had 12 items to implement covering 7 areas of our plant operations. Some of those was redefine our treated storage yard. We physically changed the method and the geometry that we store ties to reduce the amount of surface area. Worked with our customer to reduce the number of ties in storage. That is currently down from a high of 300,000 pieces to roughly 100,000 pieces. We've modified our cylinder operations. And I know a lot of this won't make sense to you unless you've been to the plant. I know some of the council has. So that we're only dealing with one cylinder at a time instead of out of 5, instead in the past where we've had to essentially have 5 out at one time. We've added a new preservative, QNAP 8, roughly the cost of $150,000 in capital to reduce the use of creosote. We've enclosed our tank car and loading station to capture emissions. We've conducted scrubber studies on our existing system and determined that there's more efficient scrubber media that we've switched to reduce to improve the capture of naphthalene. Worked with our preservative suppliers to reduce the percentage of naphthalene that comes into the creosote that we purchase. Typically that's was down from 6% down to less than 2% now. And finally, the biggest one, that we changed the preservative formulation to reduce the use of dependency on creosote by half, is starting in 2016. For instance, in 2016, we used over 3 million gallons. In 2017, we used 1.5 million gallons. So we feel we've reduced our impact by half on the community. Is it enough? That's subjective to who you are. In the future, we're kind of at a crossroads. Recently, Oregon adopted the Cleaner Air Oregon rules on November 15th, and we're waiting to see how those are going to impact the plant. I say we, it's us and DEQ. Those rules haven't been promulgated. We'll either continue working on our MAO and add additional items to it, which will result in installation of additional control equipment, or as we get called in, if we get called in, or when we get called into the Clean Air Oregon rules, then we'll have to abide by those rules there. It's a 4-step process, and it will take several years to implement. Closing, before I open it up, just wanted to summarize, we do have a good working relationship with DEQ and are committed to a program for future reduction of emissions to the community. If any of you is interested for a plant tour, feel free to contact the office. We'll set some up at your convenience to come take a look at it. And then lastly, I know some of you are leaving office, some of you are coming in office, having been elected to one position at one time. I know thank yous are few and far between. I thank you personally for your service.
Appreciate that. I know, I've been on a tour.
Yes.
And, you know, this Star Award is really something. I think I went to your last award ceremony, and the quality of the safety has to be, I mean, there's only 20 in Oregon who have achieved that quality of safety for their employees. So I was very duly impressed with that. And I think your efforts have really shown that, you know, you're trying to meet the questions that the community has, so I appreciate that also. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I was the one that asked for the update because I was elected 2 years ago and it's never been discussed at city council level since that time. And so I wasn't necessarily thinking that just Ameritise would come. I was looking for a more broader update from the city on their position on the DEQ and how things are being handled, and do we think that our citizens are safe in general?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. I thought you just wanted to hear from Ameritise.
Nope.
I think guess that'll be for another day.
Okay? Let me know.
Appreciate it.
Let me know what you determine.
All right, and again, he really means that if you guys want a tour, let him know. They're willing to show you everything from A to Z, because I did that.
You were trying to realign the stacks and try to experiment and see if that would reduce odors. How was that successful? Reposition, tightening them.
Right, I can tell you that it reduced the surface area, and I can give you a pretty good number on that, Tim, probably about 72%. Now, how do you translate that to odors and impact in the community? It's so subjective, I can't answer your question honestly, completely. But we feel that, obviously, you look at all the equations we use to calculate emissions
Right.
off of stacks, the smaller surface area footprint you have, the less chance you have for emissions leaving that stack.
Another thing, the DEQ was putting in gauges around the community to collect samples. But what was the outcome of those?
They were summarized pretty good in the report that was prepared by the ATSDR. Don't ask me what that acronym stands for. It's under the human health thing. I believe it was put out last spring.
Right.
I hate to, I know I've read the report, and they basically said, like I stated earlier, that DEQ and the Oregon Health Authority, based on all the sampling they've done, don't feel we present a short or long-term health problem to the community. As far as interpretation of their data, I'd really defer you to them.
But that helps, conclude that. Now, my barometer can tell you that I have sensed that there are less odor emissions, less time. I don't know about the people living in the vicinity, but when I do go out to that area, and I appreciate your desire to try to comply and do everything you can possible. I know that the chemicals do have a byproduct, and that's the odor. But, so I'm satisfied with the results.
One of the things that I always say to Union Pacific, we have meetings from time to time because of the accident that happened in Mosier. And that one of the things that I always say at those meetings is, you could take, because my understanding is that when the ties, you process them when they hit the ground, they're owned by the railroad, correct?
That's correct.
So they move them when they want to, it's not up to you.
Correct.
But it sounds like you've gotten some cooperation from them moving those ties out sooner. I'd really appreciate knowing that. Maybe I won't harp on them so hard next time I talk to them.
Well, like I said, our numbers have shown from when this process started, say 2015, 2016, typically we maintain 300,000 or so tie equivalents on the plant, and now that's down to 100,000. So we've dropped by 66%.
Yeah,
Goodness,
I think that's a great move. Yeah.
I do too. Thank you.
Right.
Councilor Curtis, question, are you suggesting that the city take a stance on whether or not the DEQ is doing their job properly? I guess I'm not quite knowing where you're going with that.
I think I'm suggesting that it's surprising to me that for the last 2 years, we haven't discussed it at all, and I wanted a chance to get some more information and discuss it, and that's what I thought was going to happen. So I know there's a lot of positions on both sides, but I was kind of hoping to hear from both sides so that people can make up their own minds rather than just one or the other, because looking in the media, and I attended the DEQ presentations before I was elected, there was a lot of things still left up in the air, and there's still some ongoing litigation, and that is our job as city councilors to protect our citizens, and whether we decide we're not going to take an official position, I think we should do something intentionally, either choose to do something or choose not to.
So you're looking to hear from DEQ, so we're get information from all sides, is that what you were suggesting?
I was looking for a complete update. I thought that I could probably get that from the city manager like she does other updates on the topic, but however she would like to present that to the new council at the first of the year would be fine.
Yeah, I think for the most part, we've left it up to DEQ and the hearings that they've done, so, yeah, we haven't addressed it in any formal way, so.
Obviously.
All right, Wasco County parole and probation update.
Thanks for having me back. I'm Fritz Bachman, Director of Wasco County Community Corrections. I brought with me Ed Smith. He's the Housing Director for Bridges to Change, and he's the primary nonprofit we've worked with out of my office to provide the transitional housing for the community, for people on supervision. And so if you imagine back 3 years ago when we had first started investigating the whole concept of trying to get more housing in the community, specifically for a pretty vulnerable class of our community members with drug and alcohol addiction and also with criminal histories. No matter how far they'd climbed out of that, they had inherent challenges in trying to get their feet back on the ground and just get a footing back in the community in a good way. So I was very challenged, kind of starting at ground zero, figuring out how to get that happening, because research showed that what worked was really quality housing in quality neighborhoods with a quality program. And so about 2 years ago, we had connected with Bridges to Change, and we're on track to get housing started. And that was the biggest, for one thing, it was brand new. There were a lot of unknowns. There were things about the program that were new to my office, and it was new for all of you as well. And so it took a lot of research and groundwork, and then also some trust by you all to not only keep me at task and make sure we were keeping our eyes on the ball, but also to see it through and track stats and make sure that we were getting out of it what we expected to get out of it. So I thank you, honorable members of the City Council, for lending me that, and then also continuing your support. As we know, housing is such an ongoing, concern for all demographics and income levels up and down the gorge throughout Oregon. The Dalles is no exception, and so for people on my supervision, it's one of those gaps that can be very, very wide, where somebody might be thinking well and staying sober as best they can, but when they go through our treatment, our programs, and they talk to the PO, and they have some mentorship and meetings to go to, but then they go back home to an unstable environment, and that they would slip. We'd see guys with a lot of motivation and training who couldn't handle the day-to-day life skills or life support. They lacked that. So housing was a big gap for us to fill. With Bridges, in April of 2017, we opened our first house with them and started growing very slowly and keeping an eye on it. And I was personally very surprised. I gave you all an update in April of, earlier this year in April. And at that time, it was still pretty new, but we had been graduating an average of about one individual per month out of that program. And those graduations were not just, you did your time and you got a certificate, but they had gotten a job, saved up enough money for rent, found a place to go rent, and in many cases had gone from homelessness and lack of ID or skills to a job with skills, an ID, and even in some cases acquiring a vehicle or driving again. So for them, it's small stuff we take for granted, but it was really huge. What I'm excited to communicate, and I have some graphs that explain some of this, is that basically, since last April, continuing to track stats, the guys tend to graduate in kind of groups at a time, 2 to 4 in a group who are all working together at the same level together. But on average, it continues to be about a graduation a month out of our stabilization house. And that's maintaining sobriety, staying compliant with supervision or getting off supervision, following all the phases of sobriety out of the house, having a job, and saving enough money up to find a place to rent. The biggest challenge that these guys would face when they were graduating from the stabilization house was finding a rental. And they were out there, but at their income level, or sometimes they're, they'd be known by their last name as far as the family or the criminal history, a landlord could easily, know or have the information to say that, well, I don't want to rent to a felon, say, or there were challenges to finding a willing landlord. So In collaboration with Bridges to Change here, what we've continued to do is basically from our stabilization house, we have expanded the program with them to have some next step housing. We had a couple of challenging relapses. One was over a year ago, but somebody who had just blasted well through the program graduated and was really motivated, doing well. And the transition out of a very structured house with rules to a rental, even though it was all set up very well for him, it was an abrupt kind of a landing. It was a hard gearing up into real life for him, and he relapsed. So we saw that happening, and we were trying to understand how to prevent that kind of thing from happening. The real answer for that, as Bridges knows and other recovery programs know, really it's not just structured, safe housing, and then you're in the community. There's sort of a graduated level, so you go from stabilization to more of a transitional house. So what Bridges has done...
What's the
go ahead. Ed, you may be able to explain more about stabilization and transition.
So the stabilization house has a structure, has a timeline. So they have these goals to meet. They're working with the mentors. They're working with their parole and probation officers, things like this. They meet these guidelines. They graduate. The next step housing, I wouldn't call them transitional housing so much. The next step housing is purely a rental house. So as long as they're still following the rules, they're, remaining clean and sober, being an active member of the community, then they're able to stay there. So there is no timeline. So that's the difference, is the stabilization house, there's a definite timeline. The next step house is after, until they're ready to take the next step, after that step, if that makes sense.
And so you're the landlord?
Bridges to Change is, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so what I've been calling the transitional houses, Bridges refers to as the next step house, where it's a willing landlord with renters. And otherwise they're just regular anonymous members of the community who are abiding by the rules of the house and live in the community. The Bridges currently has 2 next step houses in the community. One is for women, and a recently acquired house, Bridges purchased a property adjacent to Parole and Probation's office, right across the parking lot from us. So it's very close to us, and it's actually much more accessible and close to services and convenient. The next step houses, it's designed to keep them with some basic structure, but also live fairly a normalized life. And I think that's going to be a gap filler between what we would consider stabilization to jumping out of the nest and flying all by themselves. So you may have heard, be aware, right across from the Granada, Bridges to Change has a local office here.
I just saw that the other day.
Yeah, so one thing I've been we needed it, but when we first were reaching out to Bridges, and frankly for members of the community locally, it would appear to be, it's an organization out of Portland, and yeah, they're good in Multnomah County, but what do they know about the Dalles, and how does it fit for the Dalles? It's, it's a different community, it's a smaller community, very tight-knit. I've been very impressed with Bridges' ability to hire locally, oversee things locally, make the effort and the trips, and manage it very, very locally, and really get the roots grown in here locally, because so much of the support comes at a grassroots level, and it's our own community that is supporting this. So, and a lot of that has also been neighborhood outreach, support of neighbors, responding to concerns, and not pretending that, oh no, we know what we're doing, because we had to learn how to do this here and not just plug a new program in. So, as we experienced, we had some growing pains with that. So we've really been doing well that way. Now these houses are owned by Bridges to Change, and they are the landlord, and they run the program, and the staff here in town is, they hired locally, but it's Bridges staff. What the county did not want to get into was becoming a landlord or growing staff in ways that if we had to contract down the road, we'd be laying off county employees, et cetera. It allows us a lot of flexibility, but they've got the skills and the know-how in keeping it local. So I've been very impressed with their leadership and also their continued support with us. Now, to get to the stats, and at any time if you have questions, you can certainly interrupt. I can kind of ramble here, but this, in the board packet, that first graph that I shared where it shows the number of arrests, I realize that it doesn't have a set of dates on the timeline at the bottom, because what I did was at that red line, I basically went back 20 years and collected arrest data on all of the graduates and current residents of our first house that we established, the stabilization house. And what you see here is that for vast periods of time, some of these young adults were still just, they were too young to go to Norcor, frankly, but over time, going back from the late 90s, as they came of age, what you see growing here in about 2012, 2013 would be the window of where it starts to grow, is that arrests start to really peak and stay high when these criminal careers are becoming established and continue. So these are arrests of the individuals that graduated from the house or were in the house during the rough timeline of 2013 up until the point at which they entered the house, which is the red line. And so all of the arrests I pivoted around the red line at which they entered the house. And that way you have a sense before and after of arrest history. Now that the point at which they entered the house, the earliest ones were in April of 2017. And we've put, well, my data here goes up until end of July here. But what you see happening is that criminal careers are well established. They're getting arrested at a rate of, at least 4 or 5 a month, with a peak of 8 in a month. They enter the house, and it really plummets down to darn near nothing. We get a blip here and there. We did rearrest a handful of guys for either a relapse or a timeout, or one of our residents got a Dewey, and he's now, dealing with that basically as any of us would. But as you might expect, some of these guys have made mistakes, but when you compare it before and after to entering the house, we're running on months of vast difference. And not that I've done all the math on it, but what I would consider to be, this is saving us months of jail time over courses of time. So if you consider, putting money towards housing versus holding people in jail, a program like this diverts them away from what would be jail and dealing with life. Now, slightly bigger picture here is my last graph is the trend, and I know the numbers are a little hard to see, but going back to June of 2012, these are counts of the caseload, adult supervision in Wasco County. And if you go back to about June 2012, it's at about 224. And over the course of 5-6 years, it's just a steady creep upwards and upwards, where we gained over 100 people committed crimes and sentenced to supervision, placed on supervision. And we went from 224 up to a peak of around 350. So we grew by 125. Now, I'm not going to say it's all the housing, because we've done a lot of things. We've changed the way we do treatment. We provide some more COG programs. There have been classes put in at Norcor. I think the justice system in general is thinking mindfully about community policing, frankly. So there's a lot of efforts all around. One solid piece of that is the housing bit. And so connecting the change in arrests on the previous graph with our steady downward trend of people getting off supervision successfully. And what I see is that people still trickle in at a fairly steady rate, either coming out of prison and putting on our caseloads locally, or being sentenced through the courts locally on probation. They still trickle in pretty steadily. What we're seeing more and more of are people who successfully complete supervision and get off supervision and then stay off supervision. And so it's gone down from, mid-300s, 350, 340 back in end of 2016. And I don't have the most recent data, but I think it's going down from here. The most recent data here is in July of 2018, and we're getting down to about 284. Some not entirely accurate snapshots I've tried to capture on my own indicate that we're down closer to 250, 260. It continues to go down. Now, I know it's short time frames to really measure by, but in my mind, these are all good, very good trends. So we're heading in the right direction, and we just want to try to maintain that. So I think it all connects at some extent, and housing has been a real successful piece of it. So, but thank you for your time here, and I'm happy to answer any questions about what we do.
You said you guys have changed some of your programs. You used an acronym. I think it was COG or something. What does that mean?
So cognitive behavioral programs, it used to be that we would reach into Norcor. We also have it out here in the community at Parole and Probation. They're targeted life skill and thinking programs that do role play and workbook type homework that gets them decision making and visualizing and thinking about situations in their lives, decisions they made, and the social aspects to that, the social effects. I suppose a psychologist would classify a lot of willingness to do crime as inherently antisocial, and what it does is try to engage their decision-making part of their brain to consider the full ramifications of the decisions they make and how it impacts people, whether they know them or not, how it impacts people. So it's basically reprogramming their thinking. That's cognitive programming. We went from having one set of curriculum that was known as moral recognition therapy, MRT, to we branched it out to the same company has a number of different curriculum that surround that. Some of it is specific to trauma-informed or for females specifically. Others, there's one for property and theft crimes specifically. One is specifically for sex offenders, and there's another one. Well, there's a couple more. There's another one that's for the higher resistant, more predatorily, criminally motivated individuals, where the standard MRT program wasn't really quite enough. They could kind of game the system. That one was a little harder to stay engaged with. They had to put out more work and show for it. So it's a higher resistant MRT. And then we also have an aftercare version of it all where they graduated and completed, but it was a benefit to them and wasn't going to overdose them to continue with something that practiced skills in a light way that was more of an aftercare class and kept them engaged. Some of them would graduate and almost miss the group. And short of, say, attending AA or another group, an MRT type class was still part of something conducive to their rehabilitation. There was aftercare, so we incorporated that. So we went from having like one curriculum to about 6. And we don't use them all the time, but we will use them as we have a group for it. So we branched that out. We have treatment in-house, and one big item was our work crew program. We got more established about a year and a half ago. With partnership with the Juvenile Youth Services Department, we have a work crew supervisor, and we get what's a jail diversion technique as well, but instead of just either going to jail or more or less wagging our finger, we could put them on work crew as a sanction, and they could serve a number of hours as a sanction in lieu of jail. And that would provide them some work skills and getting up in the morning type skills as well. So,
2 things. One is, when you first started off with the stabilization house, there were questions in the neighborhood. I got involved in that, and several other people here did too. But the good news is that we've heard nothing for a long time, which means you're doing a great job with the neighbors, and I've really noticed that. The second thing is, when I saw the sign down there, did I also see on the door something about probation and parole? Something struck me when I saw that, and I was wondering if you're not putting any parole or probation officers down there across from the Granada.
No, there should be, the only sign on says Bridges to James. That's the only sign that is on the office.
Maybe I did that in my head. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that you hadn't moved the offices from the county courthouse.
No, we will visit, and we'll have graduation ceremonies at the office there. And I should mention, it's not just housing, so each house has a resident house manager. So even our Next Step houses, they have a house manager on site who lives there. Bridges to Change also has 5 peer mentors, and they are dedicated to my office, and they orbit all of these houses as well. So when they walk out the door from their house and they've got their daily plan, a lot of times it can be hand in hand with a peer mentor, where they can help them get through their day, make plans, and sort out common challenges they might have. So they have a lot of good staff that basically supports the housing. So it's much more than definitely the house.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
I have a couple questions. So when this originally started out, I was a supporter, and I still am, but I'm just curious, originally the plan was just for people who were coming back to our community, who were originally from here before they went away to prison. Is that still the case, or do you think that we're bringing in people who were originally living elsewhere and now are receiving their services here while they're being reintegrated to society?
In the stabilization house, so they all have to be on supervision, and the only people who live there are specifically on supervision, and they live in Wasco County, or, reside in Wasco County. They can be a mix of local court sentenced probationers. They can also be people who have recently come out of prison. And we select those carefully. So we have placed people who came out of prison directly into that housing. It can sound bad on the outset because it's a big unknown, and what you're thinking is ex-con or hardened prisoner. I would say there's DOC. I give kudos to Oregon DOC. They have a lot of good programs in prison, and for every prisoner who's released onto local supervision, we do a reach-in with them, at least on the phone. Bridges staff will even travel to the prison itself and interview these guys, and they help us triage or case manage who we pick and choose to go in. So it's not just anybody coming out of prison, we have a landing place for them. I still effectively choose who goes in the house, actually. And some of them, I would say some of our best successes are the ones who came straight out of prison because they left prison with a regimented program of treatment, and then they join a house with regimented rules and group activity stuff. And So the stabilization house does have a mix of probationers and post-prisoners. Now, the Next Step house, it relies a lot on people with the housing need who graduate from the stabilization house. So they graduate from stabilization and they don't have that next step. A very default landing zone for them could be that Next Step house. Mm-hmm. That house can also accept motivated renters who aren't necessarily on supervision, don't necessarily have a criminal record, but they need to abide by clean and sober rules. So the need by these renters would be that they need a safe, sober environment. And that would be indicated through, say, attendance in AA or other meetings. If that answers your question.
Sort of. I didn't mean to imply that I was being negative. I actually think people are more likely to be successful with a highly structured program, and that's what you guys are providing. I do like that. You have done a great job. Obviously, there's a direct connection with the county and the program, but what about the city? Does the city, how are you connecting with the chief of police, for example, to let him know what's going on with the program? Because obviously these people are also in our city.
So I've given the chief and the captain the addresses of all the houses and opportunities to come visit the house and just see the program for itself. And then in the past, for example, so our very first house that opened, of course, neighbors are very aware and sensitive to any crime that happens. There would be reports of crime. Sometimes it would come to dispatch, or we see it in the logs, and the address might be in the vicinity, or they call me directly, or even the police chief say directly, and they're hearing about stuff. And between me and dispatch and working for the sheriff's office, but I have a good working relationship with the city police, and there would be times where, hey, I have no indication that there's any connection to the house, but there has been crime down Federal Street here on 8th and 9th Street, say. and they would be responsive to having extra patrols at night or being aware.
So they're getting a heads up, they're not being reactive, they're aware when you're adding a new house or?
Yeah, now generally these addresses, we don't make public for the sake of simply allowing normal people to live anonymous, normal lives.
Right.
But the city, the police and the sheriff, they have all the addresses. So we know where these houses are. Law enforcement in general knows where the houses are. And in one case, I had a city officer contact me and say, hey, I think I heard of an incident that was at your house. And that really, we haven't had any criminal activities at these addresses. And what it was a response that was 400 block of 11th, which, one of our addresses is, 400 East 11th. So when I looked into it, it was something just down the street on that block, but the city was aware that, hey, is this your house? And they let me know about that. So we do our best. It's not that we're going to catch and know about everything. There is crime that occurs in these neighborhoods, and I do my best to basically, when I hear about crime happening in the vicinity of these neighborhoods, I try to confirm, not only for myself, but for the neighbors, that there's really not a connection going on with anybody on supervision, anybody at the house, or known associates. Because if I am aware of that, then we track it down and basically collaborating with the city police to make sure that we're keeping an eye on these addresses. Not that there's specific reason for concern, but just to be aware that when concerns come up, we know how to speak and answer to the public who are invested,
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you very much.
Cool, thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. Anybody who wishes to speak, address the city council? Go. Come forward. Your name and address, please.
Sure. Lorraine Hunt, Post Office Box 81, Dallas.
Keep the microphone up closer, please.
Lorraine Hunt, Post Office Box 81, Dallas.
Okay.
So, I'm here today because I came 2 weeks ago and was fully prepared to present 2 pages of testimony at a hearing, and I also prepared 1 page of notes and recommendations regarding the proposed code changes. And and I turned in the notes and recommendations before 5 o'clock so that they would be, they would be here and presented. And also there was a letter from an attorney about the codes changes and not meeting the planning documents, and so those 2 were presented before 5 o'clock to the city to be included in the materials for that hearing. But the hearing was canceled, so the 2 pages that I spent 3 days and 2 nights preparing weren't delivered, and I have to be honest with you. There were so many things that I didn't know where to start coming today. I knew I was coming, but I didn't know what to say, so I'm not prepared today very well. I'm just going to...
Let me stop you and just tell you that the reason why that was canceled is because there are hearings that involve provisions in the ordinances that we're being proposed, and whatever comes out of those hearings may change our ability to have certain language in the ordinances. So we just decided the council decided to put that off until a later date, until we had the answer to the hearing. So when that happens, there will be another public hearing.
Thank you, Stephen.
And you'll have every opportunity, so.
Thank you so much. But that's not exactly true, because, well, at great expense in a lot of ways, we brought our son, there has a huge who's hugely impacted by the development right next to our home. And that information was presented some months ago at another hearing, and he was here, and it was very difficult to get him here. And I don't know if he'll be able to be here again. And he did so many, he has spent hundreds of hours doing research and finding information. So, but I'll address that. But first of all, I want to thank the people who are on this committee, and there are people that will be missed. I mean, seriously, I have valued your input, Mayor, and I have valued your input, Tanner, and you both will be gone. So we will miss you on this
But
panel. Yes,
I want you to also know, Mrs. Hunt, that we did receive your letter, and I read it thoroughly and considered all your comments, so that will continue.
Thank you. It wasn't included, however, in the minutes, and I believe that the people of the city should be able to see it's very important to see, because my notes and recommendations had absolutely nothing to do with LUBA. They were all about citizen involvement, and needs to thank you for your statement that you said it's their job to protect our citizens. That was included in a reason why these recommendations were on here, so I appreciated your comment. So that could have been included, attached to the minutes. It was delivered before 5 o'clock, and I believe the people of the city should be able to see this and consider it and look at it, and it could be important. So I think that should have been included in the minutes, as well as the other thing that was included that involves things that people can be thinking about and looking at. Of course, I'm not presenting the same thing that I had written up for those 2 days, but I did write this, so I'm just going to, and I'm going to...
Excuse me, I want you to remember that you are on a limited time.
I understand, and I've taken some things out of here. And so I want to return in these notes and recommendations and these two things that were turned in before 5 o'clock that don't have anything to do with LUBA. They were related to the plan, et cetera. So I don't know where to start in my comments at this meeting. There are so many recent events needing attention. But I've decided to address what is most timely, beginning with what is most uplifting. Past few weeks have been significant in the life of our nation and citizens who care about decency, goodwill, honesty, character, and other values exemplified by the long life of a past president. John Meacham, presidential historian and first speaker at George H.W. Bush's national service, recounted the perilous incident in which his plane went down, and he was rescued from enemy waters. He asked himself almost daily after that incident, why me? Why was I saved? The life he lived provided meaning and answers to his searching questions. Even before that incident and the question, why me, was posed regarding the president, I had been reminded repeatedly in the recent months related to the city events of a similar time in my life. Loving nature and the ocean in particular, I had driven for a day trip to the northern shore of Oregon, a very small beach holding only 2 spots for parking, at my first stop. At that beach, rocks make a rumbling sound as the tide comes in and recedes like nothing at no other beach, and I can't remember the name of it, but I just remember, I'm just describing it. It was just an incredible beach. That sound unique in all of the beaches, and one I wish to enjoy and meditate by for longer than my family would ever stay. So I'm describing a sheer wall of sand, and earth rose from that rock bed to quite a high cliff, a high height, and then there were logs scattered around on that top part. So I found a huge log near the edge of the cliff and began my day at that beach, not knowing how long I had been internalizing the sights and sounds. I was suddenly and without warning covered with water, knowing instantly that a sneaker wave had crept up the wall of sand without my knowledge, dousing me before I had a chance to move. The water receded down the cliff and out to sea, the huge log that stayed put, the only reason I was not swept out to sea with the water. My legs had gashes, probably from being dashed against the log, and I was soaked, but I was alive and amazed. After gathering my wits, I drove into the nearest town, recounting my experience, person speechless, aware of another likely outcome, and they helped me with treatment for my gashes. And I don't remember anything about the rest of that day, but I remember that so well, just how quickly that happened. And I'm sure I was in shock. But have often thought about others that I heard about who were swept off a jetty or out to sea in other circumstances.
Mrs. Hunt, that doesn't have anything to do with the city, I'm sorry.
You know what? It does right now.
Well, your time is literally up. Is there something that you can address with the city manager?
No, that's okay. I'll take it up another time.
Can you submit that in
I'll take it up another time, that's fine. And here's what I'm going. Can I just do it one more minute?
Sure.
Okay, it's the why me part. I have been pondering, why not me? Why not me swept out to sea? Why was I spared? And recently it has become evident to me that I am here to give voice to concerns of many who have done their best to share their values both in word and in deed. In words at public hearings, many citizens my age. And then I was going to go on from there. So that's something that was important to me. If you wonder why I'm involved in what I'm involved in.
Well, if you would like to make some time to speak with me, I'd be glad to meet with you.
You know what? This is important for other reasons. I think people need to hear other things in here related to respecting people who spoke at the other hearings. There's so many old people. I really want them to be valued and their voices heard. That's something I'll address another time.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there anybody else who wishes to address the council? All right, next item on the agenda is city manager report.
I have no report tonight.
All right, city attorney.
A few items for the council's information. This week is a fairly busy week for me, I guess, in terms of the municipal court. I have 2 hearings on Wednesday along with other cases involving animal control. One involves an animal that's been in the custody of Home at Last for quite some time, and we are seeking an order that will allow Home at Last to adopt the dog out. The dog has been in since May, unfortunately, and the gentleman that the dog was taken from has resisted efforts to resolve it, so we're going to have a hearing to hopefully get an order to allow that dog to be released. We have another trial on Wednesday involving a dog that was involved, unfortunately, where a domestic animal belonging to a person was killed as a result of 2 dogs who attacked the animal and killed it, and so we are seeking an order in that case to have the animal removed from the city. The other dog already has been removed, we believe, and so we're going to have that come up. And then on Thursday, I have a jury trial from a case that has been pending for quite some time involving a DUII that has now been set for trial, so this is a little bit unusual for me to have that many hearings, but that's what I've been involved with. I think I notified the council that we did receive a proposal from a possible lease for the Girl Scout house, and I will follow up with Julie to get information about what the, I guess Columbia Cascade Housing is also looking at that site possibly, or?
No, we never spoke about that.
Right.
After I suggested it, and that would be, I thought you had said you wanted to declare that property surplus, and that's different than what you're talking about now. So if we were going to declare it surplus, I think Mid-Columbia Housing may have had an interest in acquiring it for that program, but they wouldn't lease it.
Okay.
I didn't know leasing was an option.
Well, we've had a request, and again, I think what I'd like to do is to bring
Is that
all
a
that.
separate request?
It is, actually, it's a separate request that's coming at this time, but I'd like to discuss that as all about whether we do declare it surplus, because that would then allow us to negotiate with Columbia Cascade Housing or another person if we sold it, if that once it was declared surplus.
So the question would probably be lease versus.
Right, versus a sale, or if we chose to market the property to sell it out, you know, to offer it.
But you're not asking for any decision today?
No,
'Cause I
I just,
know our missing council member has strong feelings, and
Right.
I wouldn't want to make a decision while he's gone.
Right, I think I'm going to try to schedule it for either the first or the second meeting in
Okay.
January to have that, have a resolution to declare it surplus, so then we could proceed to decide what to do.
Well, you wouldn't declare it surplus if you're going to own it and lease it.
I guess that's true, and what I'd like to do is decide, because we've had a request for a lease, and I guess I need direction from the council whether they want to do that or if they want to go a different direction.
We'll just.
I guess regardless, I'd like to see it opened up to the public, you know, so the public knows about it if we did decide to lease it. I mean, we had a presentation tonight from Bridget to Change, and they talked about housing and how hard it is to attain housing and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I'd just like everyone to be able to know about it if anybody is interested, whether it is a lease or a purchase.
Right, and I think once we declare it surplus, then we could decide what direction we want to go, whether we want to, at that point, not consider a lease or consider a sale, what we want to do with the property.
Okay, well, you'll bring it back to the council.
Right.
Okay.
The last item I wanted to bring up, actually Councilor Elliott's request, we've had a situation with a local developer that some years ago on the Joseph G. Wilson property, he obtained a credit for SDCs that should have gone to another developer, and It appears at this point, I've had some correspondence with his attorney about recovering the SDCs, and he believes that he doesn't know the SDCs, but I also became aware of a recent case involving issues related to SDCs and their recovery, and I want to research that case. But Councilor Aird asked me to bring it up and to let the council know about that we're working on trying to get those SDCs back. But
So there was a credit given.
Right.
But it didn't go to that person who it was supposed to be?
Right, that's correct. There was a mix-up between the developers. There was different developers on that property, and unfortunately, Mr. Critchfield is his name, he received the credit when he shouldn't have.
Okay. Yeah, we'll wait to hear from you. Is that it?
Yeah, that's
All right.
everything.
Councilwoman Long Curtis.
Just reporting that since the last council meeting, I have attended an urban renewal meeting, and looking forward to that getting started up again after the first of the year with new committee members. And also Q Life met, and we're proceeding with some various different projects. Mostly it's just kind of administrative and failures of service and things like that at this point, but we are looking for at least one more public member to fill out the committee.
Did it? Well, Councilman McLaughlin.
On the 30th of November, I attended a airport commission meeting, and most of the topics were dealing with normal operations. However, there are some questions about supply of water to the airport itself, and the number and size of the water pipe, and the services going to the individual hangars and other entities. And so in the past, it's a changeover from the way it was into what is developing now. So it's realigning with the structure of the water system that's in place in Dallasport.
I thought I remembered that the airport had gone into some sort of a agreed development with Dallasport for the provision of water in a new reservoir or something at one time?
I think the details are being worked out, but yes, that is one thing, but it's like, it's new procedure, new.
Okay.
And there are some changeovers coming, but it will improve and give, right now, all of the building is coming through the airport, and they have no controls over what is being used where. So that's the effort, is to try to get those operational things under control. And there's another developer that has asked for, separate from the past developer, for the golf course in the area, that is also looking to expand usage of that area. So that is, that's in development right now. So that's excellent. I visited the American Express year-end sock hop last week, and if you haven't been to the Neon Sign Museum, again, I tell you, it was very impressive, and probably 100 to 125 passengers, and there was a house band playing, and it was very impressive. And so if you haven't gotten by the Neon Sign Museum, it's well worth your time. I did meet with the mayor-elect last week, and we surprisingly went on KODL, and he wasn't scheduled. We went in your stead. So I call it a free-for-all Friday, in that everything was on. We were talking about Lions, about the recent ELF food drive, which went very, very well last week. It was Tuesday and Wednesday. The fire department, it's everyone loves a firefighter, and the Rotary Lions community bringing in food to supply food here at the holiday season for St. Vincent's and also Salvation Army. It was a great thing. Let's see, and I did attend the Starlight Parade and the tree lighting afterwards. That's my report.
All right, Councilwoman Miller.
I attended the Urban Renewal Agency meeting on the 27th of November. And excuse me, I attended a work session for the Household Hazardous Waste Committee.
I also attended the Urban Renewal meeting, and I also attended the Q Life meeting, and as Darcy mentioned, we have an at-large position that's been vacant for a while, so I may stay on and stir the pot.
As only you can do.
That's right.
Is that it?
That's it.
Well, since the last meeting, I attended the Furball, which is a fundraiser for Home at Last, and very successful. It was out at the Country Club, and it was a great event. And Councilman-elect was also there, Mr. Runyon. It's an example of communication that it was successful. When the Home at Last was about to go down, the city and the county were able to get together and provide funds, and new management went in there, and that place is humming, and it's a success story. So it really is an example of entities getting together, communicating well, and getting a resolution to a problem that existed. On Thursday, I will attend the Economic Development Committee for the Chamber. Again, I'm asking them to kind of look at what they can do to help bring all the entities together and talk about, are we all heading in the same direction? Interested to hear what they've come up with. They've got a work plan that I understand they've submitted to the Chamber Board, so I'll be interested in that. I'll be attending the Transportation Advisory Board. That's a small committee out of McKed, which is running our transit, and the subject of that meeting will be looking at the routes that we're going to recommend for fixed routes, which will be a substantial increase and enhancement for this community, but something that we need very badly. And then on the 18th, I will be attending the Regional Solutions meeting, and at that we'll be talking about the governor's new budget, which does include some changes as it relates to money available to regional solution teams. I think there are 6 regions that have committees for regional solution. If you're not familiar with that concept, what it provides us is an opportunity when there are more than one agency involved in an issue and an issue gets stuck, then we can help to come to resolution in the region. And there's a governor's representative on there. It's been a very good committee. And last but not least, I want to say that I also went to the event at the Neon Sign Museum, and Mayor-elect Rich Mays was there. And the thing that I was so impressed with is I talked to the concierge, and he said, you know, it was sort of difficult to get people off the boat. And the band was so good. I said, who's that band? And he said, that's our band. Well, it may have been difficult to get them off the boat, but there was about 100 people that were really loving it. They were playing 60s music, and these people were just, it was a sock hop. They were dancing up a storm. And then David Benko came over to me and he says, they want to do this 60 more times next year. So that's a real success story as far as I'm concerned. Urban Renewal, purchased that building and made an agreement with David, and David has lived up to his end of it, and look at the success. The success is going to be absolutely great for this community. So I just wanted to share that. I was really impressed. And there will be, I think, an annual meeting here in a couple of days, and I'll be attending that. Next item, consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time and energy on the important items and issues. Any councilor may request an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action items section. Today there is A is approval of November 9, 2018 joint work session meeting minutes. B, approval of November 26, 2018 regular city council meeting minutes. And C, approval of resolution number 18-031, concurring with mayor's appointments to the city budget committee. So I have a motion regarding the consent agenda.
Do we have any discussion on the council meeting minutes, can we include Mrs. Hunt's document? Can't?
Those were submitted as testimony, which we did not take, so when we reconvene that hearing from it being postponed, they'll be entered into the record.
So they will be, thank you.
Do you want to make a motion?
Oh, I can make a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second. Moving second to accept the consent agenda as presented. Any discussion?
Yes, Mayor Lawrence, mine wasn't presented as testimony, mine was sent to the city. The other letter was, but mine was.
Okay.
So mine can be included, but maybe the other one can't, because that was, I mean,
Okay.
that's accurately the way it was.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing to receive testimony regarding vacating a portion of the alleyway off of Jordan Street between West 16th and West 17th Street. This is the time scheduled for a public hearing to allow for public testimony concerning the proposed vacation of the alleyway off of Jordan between West 16th and West 17th Streets. First, a staff report will be presented. Following the staff report, I will ask persons who wish to present testimony to come to the microphone, state their name and address, and present their testimony. All speakers are requested to be specific in their presentations and to focus their remarks upon the relevant issues raised by the proposed vacation of public right-of-way. So at this time, I'm opening the public meeting and asking for a staff report.
Thank you, Mayor Lawrence.
Thank you.
As you stated, this is for a street vacation for Mr. Paul Allen Easling, which Paul actually goes by Allen. I keep calling him Paul, but the City Council at your September 24th meeting authorized staff to initiate a partial street vacation, which is indicated on the map that was included in your mail out. It's basically just a small stub of alleyway that actually is surrounded by Mr. Easling's property. The request has gone through our city's site team application process, which is basically a pre-application, and that there were no concerns from staff on that vacation, and that staff supported the application. As of the date of this staff report, there were no comments that were received. Staff did, however, receive multiple calls actually inquiring what the definition of what a street vacation is, because everybody takes a little bit more of the fun approach. That's actually a vacation. So it is kind of a unique name. So we did explain to quite a few people. Once they understood what it actually meant, there really wasn't any comments that were received. The review requires or is stated through our municipal code, Title 11 and Article 11.16 for street vacations. The criterion that we have to review, or that is being reviewed today, is basically looking at the vacations if they're initiated by the City Council, that we find that a majority of the area affected by the vacation has not objected in writing, which we've received nothing to date. The second one is notice has been duly given. So all properties were notified within the specified regions or areas. Those were mailed out to property owners on November 26th, as well as posting of the property. So we actually take buckets out there to post the actual area so people can drive up and take a look to see. The proposed vacation does not conflict with the city's comp plan and/or other city ordinances. So at this time, there's no existing or potential access to the adjoining properties that will actually be affected. Goal 11 for our public facilities and services requires that the timely, orderly, and efficient arrangement of these public utilities not be affected, and staff does not believe that is happening. Number 4 is the public interest will not be prejudiced by the vacation of the public right-of-way. No public interest is in this area will be harmed with vacation. We have included in the special ordinance information regarding easements so that people can still, or that access will be, or an easement will be in place. If the vacation proceedings were initiated by motion, finding that all abutting property owners have consented to the vacation. So as stated before, the area surrounding this stub of alleyway is owned by Mr. Easling, so there's no impact to any adjacent property owners. Budget implications, the cost associated with this proposed partial vacation is pretty minimal. It's pretty much staff time, preparation. All costs affiliated with the legal description as well as recording costs are upon the applicant. And staff's recommendation is move to adopt Special Ordinance 18-580, which is approving street vacation number 66-18, to vacate a portion of right-of-way surrounded by 1715 Jordan Street. Do you have any questions of staff?
Any questions? Anyone in the audience who wishes to provide testimony?
Hello, I'm Alan Easling, 1715 Jordan Street. I wanted to speak on behalf of this. I initiated this process and I'm in support of it. And I want to be available for any questions that anybody might have.
Any questions?
I don't.
All right. Straightforward. No questions. Thanks for coming. Anyone else? All right, so the public hearing is closed, and I'll open the matter before the city council for deliberation.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Very straightforward with where it's located at. So.
I looked at that as well. Should we take a, not yet, discussion?
Move.
Does anyone want the
Yeah.
ordinance read?
For me? For me?
Does anyone want the
Oh.
ordinance read?
Yeah. Doesn't say that here. Does anybody want the ordinance read in full?
No.
No.
So, would you read the ordinance by title only?
Special ordinance number 18-580, an ordinance vacating a portion of alleyway off of Jordan Street between West 16th and West 17th Streets.
Now, I'll move to adopt special ordinance number 18-580, approving the street vacation number 66-18 to vacate a portion of the right-of-way surrounded by 1715 Jordan Street by title only.
I'll second.
Period.
All right. Been moved and seconded to adopt special ordinance number 18-580, approving the street vacation number 66-18 to vacate a portion of right-of-way surrounded by 1715 Jordan Street by title only. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that's approved. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an action item, the Dow's disposal rate increase request. So,
I'd like to say something
Yes.
before this. It's been said in the past that I
Yes.
don't have to abstain, but I work for the same company that owns the Dow's Disposal, so I am abstaining from any vote.
if you want to come forward, we have materials that have been presented to us, but if you want to add anything, or if you want to entertain questions,
Sure.
I'll give you that.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Thanks for the opportunity tonight.
That's a familiar face.
Yes. As outlined in the letter I presented to Mr. Parker, the Wasco County landfill, in their agreement with the county, is eligible for a 85% rate increase of CPI based on the West Coast index, which this year was 3.9%. So the landfill got a 3.3% increase, and that's the same increase I'm asking for. I know any increase for the constituents is, never easy. We try to make it incremental and keep in consideration how it impacts the residents of the city. Based on what we've experienced this year, the disposal component is probably most reasonable that we've seen based on container prices, drop box prices, anything that's had a component or a mention of a tariff to it. Things are going through the roof, but having said that, we have to do what we can to stay, fiscally responsible and the most efficient that we can with what we have. A couple examples of how a 3.3% increase affects our rates. A 32-gallon can picked up once a week has an impact of 59 cents a month, or 13 cents per pickup. Going to the larger roll cart, that weekly impact per pickup is 20 cents. On the commercial side, for the dumpster service, if you will, the yard and a half containers you see behind many businesses and down the alleyways, that impact is $3.22 a month, which equates to 74 cents per pickup. So what we're trying to do is do our collection and take the opportunity the best that we can and stay as efficient as we can. But if there's any questions, I'd do my best to answer them.
My question really isn't so much about the rate, but I guess it's about the longevity of the landfill. What are we looking at?
So just, I don't manage the landfill, but Waste Connections does own the Wasco County landfill. And the meetings that I've been at over the years, at the current tipping tonnage, it's about 42 years is what they're saying right now at the Wasco County landfill. 4 years ago, it was north of 100 years, I believe. So lots of material coming in. There's portions of the landfill that can be annexed or re-proposed for licensing to expand the landfill, if you will.
Development.
Yeah, I know a lot of that is stuff that comes in from elsewhere.
Out of area, yeah.
A lot, and it's increased substantially to go from 100 years to 42 years. Are they discussing, I mean, I know 42 years, I'm not even going to be around, but are they discussing what the next step is?
They are. They've talked about it. Wasco County, the commissioner, was, very interested in knowing what that longevity is and how they increase the lifespan, if you will. And not having a landfill background, there are ways they can increase it by the types of material that are accepted and how they build and slope. Sludge and dredge is more wanted item than construction and demolition debris. There's more voids and airspace left in that, whereas a solid like a sludge, it's compacted very well.
It's a kind of an economic issue though, isn't it? I mean, the more they get in, the more they get to charge and they make money at, and yet it's using Wasco County land to do that. So I'm hoping that, they're gonna, look for solving that when that happens. Obviously, I'm not gonna be here, like I said.
We'll also be aware that every ton that comes into the landfill, the county receives a fee.
Right.
And then every out of area ton, I believe, has an elevated rate as well, so.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments?
Then this rate increase that was passed through the Wasco County landfill, that went through a public process and was approved by County Commission?
Yes.
I knew the answer to that. However, I did want to point that out, that this is a flow-through rate increase that you have no control over.
Right.
So it's basically a pass-through to the end user. If you didn't get this pay increase, would it place your company in jeopardy as far as profitability?
Oh, no question.
Okay. I rest my case.
Oh, good, Counselor. Anybody else have questions or comments? If not, then we have a recommendation here.
Excuse me, Mayor, we need
Yes.
to allow for any public input. It's not a public hearing, but we need to allow an opportunity for any public comment
Okay.
before the
Is
council.
there anybody who wishes to give public comment on this issue? Okay, seeing none, thank you for reminding me of that. We do have a staff recommendation, as I said, so
I'd like to see the city, our next intergovernmental type meeting, have a conversation with the county just to see, what their thoughts are, current thoughts, and if we need to hold some sort of a town hall or something like that to let everybody know that we're thinking about the longevity, even though it's a county topic.
I mean, from 100 to 42 is a substantial change.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes me raise more questions about
Yeah.
tipping fees of out of county areas and stuff like that, so.
Okay. I agree. Need a motion.
Well, looks like I'm the motion king this.
You are the one.
Do we need to read this by title?
No, you can just do
All right.
a motion to adopt
All
the
right.
resolution.
I move to adopt resolution number 18-030, approving a rate increase averaging approximately 3.3% resulting from increased operational and disposal fee cost incurred by the Dalles Disposal Service effective January 1st, 2019.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adopt resolution number 18-030 as stated. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Abstain.
Abstain. Did you vote?
No.
Okay. 2 ayes, 1 abstention, and 1 no. That's approved. So, next item on the agenda is an executive session. The city council of the city of The Dalles will now meet in executive session in accordance with ORS 192, subpart 2, subpart small h, to consult with legal counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the discussions or deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in the executive session. At the end of the executive session, Rod
Runyon.
At the end of the executive session, we'll return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. I'd like to specifically request that Councilman-elect Rod Runyon and Mayor-elect Rich Mays be allowed to stay.
Sure.
Yes.
All right?
Sit by Roger.
Yeah, you can.
Shut the door.
Yeah,
Yes.
please.
Oh,